Never know when something could go wrong. Although you're given your orders and the situation is complex and so on, you just hope that all that has fallen into place and that the human factor, which becomes what we call often the fog of war, doesn't mess it up.
We started to really understand that there was a thing out there that we called the Third Force. It wasn't just a government and the rebels. There was a third group, and it was a group that was determined not to see Arusha implemented. We had seen these guys running around in baggy colored suits, and they looked like a bunch of clowns. It turned out they were the Interamwe. They were the youth wing and the extremists. They did hate Tutsis and they wanted to kill them. They listened to the propaganda of the radio station that the Tutsis were a threat. They were coming back to take back our land, take away everything we have.
You can understand an entire people growing up learning certain mythologies about themselves and their neighbors. And all the Hutu grew up, often in church-sponsored schools, learning that the Tutsi were different and probably alien.
The problem that essentially was created by the Belgians, who had this country as a colony, through their whole ethnicity exercise and their anthropologists who had gone on a wild spree of idiotic theories and sizes of heads and this and that. And the administrators included the ethnicity on the ID cards. And that then splits the country and identifies you as elements of difference.
I understand the intense ethnic hatreds weren't really in the soul of Hutu and Tutsi, but were stoked and encouraged by the imperial powers over the years.
The first time I saw a gun in 1960, it was with a priest, a Belgian priest, who was helping the group of civilians killing the Tutsi in 1960.
Normally, it has been UN practice that the former colonial power does not participate in peacekeeping missions on former colonies. So the Belgians technically should not have come to that mission, but they were the only ones that were putting well-led, well-trained, well-experienced, well-equipped troops on the ground. Canada accepted the force commander's position, but could not give the contingent. Because Canada at the time was literally out of troops. The Ghanaians contributed a battalion, and the Tunisians contributed a company, and the other 400 was Bangladesh. That then became our force.
Bonjour. They recruit them pretty young here in this country. During the war, you could find them 15 years old, 14, 15. The aim was to find any way of breaking the political impasse and to offer up a safe place where Kagame and Habyarimana could meet. And in this very humble place, they could do that. I had brought generators, I had brought computers, I brought everything. No lighting, nothing. We had to bring the tables and chairs ourselves. There's so many things that conspire to make it impossible. I had extremists, I had hardliners, and I had moderates. Now, these guys did not believe the war was over. And as much as I kept telling them, listen, you're at peace. The peace agreement had been signed. You are in the process of moving to a whole new political plan. There could have been possibilities, but by then they knew that they were going to keep the war going. They knew they were going to do the massacres and then relaunch the war. The whole damn thing is what could have been. The lost opportunities, the decisions that created far more complexity than solutions. Anyways, maybe it's just another naive idea.
What the world fails to understand is that there was diplomatic information flowing in significant quantities. The French, the Italians, the Vatican, the various governments that had missions in Rwanda, they were sending reports at the end of 1993 and early 1994, which signaled an apocalypse.
The French government worked with the Rwandan government that was planning the genocide, knew everything that was going on, and not only didn't complain, but did the opposite, legitimized and spoke on behalf of the government everywhere in the world. So the French government kept giving the killers the conviction that they could get away with murder.
From the 11th of January onwards, it went straight downhill. Jean-Pierre, the informant, apparently was a successful soldier and then had been tasked training the Interamwe. He told us he was being asked to prepare lists of Tutsis and to have them in the hands of Interamwe. And he knew that what they were doing was preparing for extermination. He said there were 4 arms caches in the city of Kigali. General Dallaire's intention was to raid the arms caches and to knock the Interamwe right off their feet.
This was a culminating point. This was the point in which we would actually change the nature of the operations that were going on.
The wires between Kigali and New York were burning red hot that whole week. They came back and forbid that operation. Initially, we thought they just don't understand. That they didn't understand what his words were. It wasn't a case of the words were pretty clear. It was the fact that they were just gun shy.
I literally felt I had been chopped at the knees. That I had this thing in the bag and that it had been taken away from me.
General Romeo Dallaire was naive about the workings of the United Nations. How could you be otherwise? It is the most complex and mystical Byzantine labyrinth in the world. He didn't understand that if he went to New York and made his case and they gave him a hearing, that didn't mean that they would comply.
Then the bastards should have pulled us out. They should have done that. The future of a nation was riding a lot on how the UN was doing it.
Literally, it was like watching a fuse burn to a powder keg. And then in March and April, we could just sense that it was deteriorating. And finally, there was an explosion.
Heavy fighting has broken out around the capital of Rwanda hours after the president died in a plane crash.
The plane was shot down by a rocket near the Kigali airport.
That means that the government has collapsed. It's not at all clear who's in charge of Rwanda at the moment.
I was very worried. I would get up in the morning, put the TV on and the radio and listen to whatever piece of news I could get. And quite often I had to tell Pletcho, well, don't worry, he's still alive, he's okay. I lied so much during that period, but I had no choice, I had to.
I remember what I told my son. Poor kid was barely 15, and as we flippantly do, you're now the man of the house, and you take care of things, and something, very, very man thing, sort of slap on the back there, boy, and all that. And when the war started, and there was a great risk of me becoming a casualty, the impact on that on my son was just beyond description. He felt that he was not able to do that. Yet his dad told him. parting words.